Today we're going to be looking at something called Mini 3, which is basically just a quick exercise that works on your flam hybrid rudiments. You'll be able to get the sheet music and the info for this video. So once you have that, let's go ahead and start breaking it down. So in the first line we just have a measure of triplet check with accents on the downbeat, and a measure of tap drags, measure of flam accents, and then finally the flam drags. The purpose of putting in this order is to kind of check yourself and make sure you're not changing anything from measure to measure. So let's go ahead and take a look at those first two measures. So just right off the bat, we want to be sure that we're building on a solid check. We want to make sure we're playing with two distinct heights, so we're not letting our inner beats creep up. We also want to make sure we're not squeezing or pinching the accents into the head. We don't let the stick resonate. So once we feel like we have a really solid check to build on, let's go ahead and add to it. So a couple of tendencies we can check ourselves on when it comes to these drags. So first of all, we want to make sure we're not lifting for those diddles. We want to keep those two distinct heights we were talking about earlier. And on the contrary, we don't want to drop them in either. We want to make sure we're getting a nice wrist turn and getting a good quality of sound from each of the notes in those diddles. As we add in these flam accents, it's important to pay attention to your grace notes on the low end. I've seen a lot of players try to lift up for their grace notes when in reality your playing position is pretty much already grace note height. So from just your playing position, just do a stroke from there and that's a grace note. Something to keep in mind is your flam spacing. You don't want to play too wide or too close down either. So this will be our first hybrid rudiment of the exercise. As we get into the meaty stuff like this, it's really easy to just want to let your regard for heights and rhythmic accuracy to just kind of go out the window. That's why this is a really good exercise to check yourself on to make sure you're playing these things correctly. So we want to be really conscious when we get to this measure about applying everything that we had talked about earlier. This especially goes for the drags we talked about in the second measure. We want to make sure that as we add in the flams, that doesn't change the rhythm from that check we had earlier. So now that we've got the first line down, let's go ahead and take a look at the second one. This line deals with cheese flams or just cheeses, whichever you want to call them. The first measure is the same as the previous line, so we've already knocked that one out. The second one is just accented diddles on the downbeats. On these accented diddles, it's really common for players to try to squeeze or pinch in the diddles, which kind of gives them a crush sound. But also we want to make sure that we're not playing them too open. We want to play correct rhythms on these accented diddles. The third measure is again just straight flam accents. The last measure we finally have the cheeses. Now we want to make sure that we're really applying all the accented diddle work we did earlier. We're not crushing or slurring the diddles now that we've added flams. The last line deals with flam fives. These are pretty much just flam drags and cheeses kind of combined into one. The first measure is again same stuff. Second measure is accented 5-stroke rolls on the downbeats. The third measure is again just straight flam accents so we can check ourselves before the fives. When we do get to the flam fives, it's really crucial that we apply everything we talked about on the 5-stroke rolls on the downbeats from the earlier measure. The tendencies from that measure are going to be even more prevalent in this measure because there's more notes. In fact, this measure has more notes than anything else in the exercise, so this is where your tendencies are really going to want to pop up. So now that we've broken down essentially every measure of this exercise, let's go ahead and take a shot at the whole thing.